The doctor actually was saying that her heartbeat was dropping. Yeah. And it was like, we have to hurry up and get her out.
We're going to use a vacuum.
If not, we're going to use a vacuum. What's up, real ones? Welcome back to the Real Relationship Podcast, where we're bringing the real back to relationships.
Yes, sir.
I'm Asha Steele.
And I'm Devin Steele.
And you guys, we are excited.
Clap it up for us for getting back.
Oh my goodness. It's been too long.
Yeah, we've had a lot of things going on since our last episode that we definitely going to touch on throughout this episode. But let's just start with you, man. Like, you just brought a new baby into this world.
Yes, okay.
You expanded our family. You did what you had to do inside that delivery room.
Again.
You pushed and pushed. Mm-hmm. And now we got a beautiful daughter. So how you feeling these days? I know our listeners want to know.
Yes. So all our listeners out there, if y'all don't follow us on media, we welcome our baby girl.
Now, the first question is, why don't you follow us on social media? You need to go ahead and search Devin Steele on Instagram and Asha Steele on Instagram and Real Relationship Podcast on Instagram.
And follow.
What are you doing?
Yes. But yes, we welcomed our baby girl, Amaya J. Steele, January 2nd.
Yeah.
And it was some work. Okay.
Why was it so much?
I feel like from talking to other moms that, you know, they try to say, oh, the second time, you know, it's going to be a breeze. It's easy. But I mean, that's not always the case. And as y'all know from the previous podcast that I talked about, the pregnancy journey was not the same, of course. It was a lot harder. And delivery wasn't really easy either, right?
So first, before we get into the delivery part, what made the first trimester, second trimester, what made it different from Aria with Amaya?
So, you know, the biggest thing I noticed from pregnancy to giving birth to Amaya, the biggest thing I feel like has been the fact that it's not just me and you, right?
Yeah.
When we conceived Aria, and we had her, it was just us, right? And then, because Leah wasn't living here at the time, but even still, it was just us, right? Now having a toddler, it's so hard, right? It's hard because it's like, I can't necessarily just, if I'm feeling sick, like I was experiencing HG, and being nauseous all the time.
What is HG? Because some people out there probably have no idea. And you probably don't even remember what the acronym stands for.
No, it's hypernemesis gravidarum. Thank you. Clap it up.
How long did you practice that?
I didn't practice it. I feel like I experienced it the first time with Aria. I had never heard of it. Didn't have no clue what it was. So this time, now that I experienced it, it was a lot worse. And they say it usually gets worse with each pregnancy. So it was just like, oh, I know what this is. But the fact that it was magnified, it was just like, whoa. So yeah, just experiencing that, I couldn't just like lay in the bed and just feel the motions, or, you know, go through the pregnancy journey and have my upbeat spirit of, oh, I want to do this, I want to take these pictures, I want to do you know, I couldn't even really work out. She was
tapped out, y'all.
Yes, tapped out, because it's just like you're trying to juggle so much. And like I said, having a toddler and she's constantly on the move, we all know how toddlers can be. It just wasn't the same experience, right? And so it was a lot harder on me, mentally, physically, emotionally. But then giving birth, it was challenging as well, because with Aria, I don't know if we even talked about this. Y'all probably saw the clip from YouTube that we posted. But when I was pushing, y'all, the first time with Aria, I could not breathe, right? They had to put the mask on me to help me breathe. And this time I try to work on my breathing a little bit more. I try to be more mindful of like pushing and breathing and stuff like that, because with Aria, they wanted to use forceps at some point. And then she was like, oh, we can't do this, then we're going to have to go to a C-section. And I'm like, we're not using no instruments.
Hold on. So again, because a lot of my men probably out there don't even know what forceps are. So it's like the little...
Yeah, like a clamp tool that they'll use.
What is the little things called that you flip on the grill? What's the tongs?
Tongs,
yeah. They're like little tongs.
Yeah,
for
like
heads.
to grab them out. And I was just like, and you know, they try to go over briefly like, oh, it may cause damage to this and it may do this, but you'll be fine. Right. And I'm just like, we're not doing all of this. And of course I had my husband there, and he helped me throughout that process, just talking to me, giving me words of encouragement to help me, like, you know what, you got this.
She wasn't listening to me though, because I was like breathing. She wasn't breathing, so I don't know how much it was working. The breathing
was hard, but just having at that moment, it was hard. But we went through the same thing with Amaya, where it was like I was breathing, I was pushing, and it was just like, they was like, oh, we got to do this if you don't get this. And then the doctor actually was saying that her heartbeat was dropping. Yeah. And it was like, we have to hurry up and get her out.
We're going to use a vacuum.
If not, we're going to use a vacuum. And in that moment, it clicked to like when they said that about Arya. And I'm like we were talking about it, just something in my body just turned on where it was like, Asha, put this cape on and get it done. Yeah. And like, I had told Devin, like a song had came on, and it just reminded me of us. And it just like filled me up that I was just like, oh, I got this. And he was there and he was talking to me. And I was like, I can do this. I have to do this. And as soon as she came out, I was just bawling. Like I was bawling. I did not cry like that with Arya. Because I was
too tired.
I was tired and I was in so much shock. But it was so emotional in that moment because it was just like, I don't want nobody hurting my babies. Yeah. And this is, I'm going to let y'all know from right here, y'all not about to do nothing to me or my child. Right. So I'm going to show you, I'm going to push this baby out.
Yo, you know what was crazy about this whole experience, how things differed for me? I've never been on the bottom half of the bed for no delivery. Like I've always been at the top cheering you on and stuff. Like I never saw it from that perspective. Mm-hmm. And this time, I don't even know why I made my way down there, but I'm down there because I'm holding your leg, right? And I forget, when I was growing up, there was this special with Martin Lawrence, I think. Mm-hmm. And he was on stage where he was telling a joke, and he was like, he was watching his girl give birth. Mm-hmm. He was like, man, you messing my coochie up. Like, you just messing it up. And I ain't really understand the joke because I was mad young. I don't even know why my parents let me watch this, but I was mad young, so I didn't even understand the joke. I'm just like, all right, I see adults laughing. They must know what he talking about. But at 33 years old, I finally understood what he mean, because that doctor was ripping you apart.
You don't have to give y'all
no, that. I got to, bro, because I was speaking of our topic today, traumatized. I was traumatized by what I saw, because she was literally like,
okay.
And I would see Amaya head, and I'm like, yo, I thought I knew Asha inside and out, but I didn't until this point.
I cannot.
It was the most traumatizing thing that I ever saw, but it was also beautiful. But it was just like, it was crazy.
I can't.
It was crazy.
I can't.
But you did it.
It was definitely an experience for sure.
And then you, I know you talked about, because I know a lot. We have a lot of new listeners, new followers on social media. Y'all still been consuming this stuff, even though we haven't been doing it for a while now. But recently you put out a video on Instagram, pretty much sharing how this whole journey has really been tough for you. Like you just said, physically, mentally, emotionally, spiritually, everything. Mm-hmm. Share with them a little bit about what you shared on Instagram, because not everybody follows us, and they're probably questioning why we've been going for so long.
Yeah. So, like Devin said, if y'all are not following us and y'all listening to this podcast, stop what y'all doing and go follow us, okay? So y'all can be up to date on these stories. But no, I feel like I was saying, this journey has been, or our pregnancy journey, my pregnancy journey has been a lot different, way more challenging. But I was talking, we had the opportunity to do an interview, and in that moment, it was like we were talking about it. We were excited because at that point in time, it's been like months since we have recorded and put any content out. And so at that moment when we had got the opportunity to do the interview on TV to talk about the podcast and everything like that, it was like I was excited. We were trying to get it together. We had talked about it. We talked about what we were going to go over and how everything was going to go, the running show, right? And so in my mind, I'm like, okay, this could be the perfect opportunity for us to, get back in the swing of things, because I feel like we had left you guys hanging for so long. And it was like, if y'all don't know, I thoroughly enjoy doing this podcast with my husband. I feel like it brings me like a sense of purpose in a time where I was trying to figure out what I should be doing with my life, right? I was trying to find out what direction I wanted to go in. And in doing this, it helped not only us help y'all, but it helped us as well. And so I was like, yes, this is the perfect opportunity for us to relaunch, get back out there. And like, of course, you know, with having a baby, I'm emotionally drained, mentally drained, literally tired, drained, okay? She's not sleeping at the time. She's up. And that night, she was up. I was up, like, trying to put her to sleep. And I completely dropped the ball, okay? Missed the interview. I missed the interview because if I have to wake up for an interview, I need 3 hours of preparation, okay? I can't go in 3 minutes. So, of course, Devin, most men can get ready just like this, but I need to get spruced up. And so I felt like the world had crumbled, right? I felt really bad because it was just like, you know, I wanted to show up. I wanted to do something that I said that I wanted to do, that we set out to do together. And I feel like it's like I was letting not only you down, myself down, but I was letting you guys down with not being able to show up and be like, okay, this is something that we started. Like, when you think of relationships, I want y'all to think of us. Like, no separation. There ain't no relationship without Asha and Devin.
Right.
And so just not being there to
I was about
show
to
up.
say ain't no real relationship without an A and a D, but there is. So. Continue on. Okay. Sorry.
But yes, so it was very upsetting. And so I was sharing in the video about how much this podcast means to me, and how, you know, it was hard for me not to be able to show up for you guys, not to be able to show up for my husband, for myself, and do this. And we had a very in-depth conversation about it. And it was just like, you know what? We have to reevaluate some things. We have to get things prioritized. We have to work as a team and get it done, because we both realize how important this podcast is, not only for, like I said, for you guys, but for us as well. And so just doing that and having that conversation led up to us being here right now. Yeah.
Well, I'm glad we're back, because like you said, just as much joy and purpose that you get from this, I get from it as well. And me and Asha was having a talk the other day, because, you know, the way that, you know, I really make money now is by traveling and speaking, right? And I really want to build something that revolves around family, because I feel like there's such an attack on family right now. There's an attack on marriage, that people don't see the benefits of it. They don't see the purpose of it. That I want to show people that when you operate in this, when you really find somebody that you love and you care about, and you have similar visions for your family's life and what direction you want to go in, you can build something huge. Because right now, I think the world, social media is like pushing materialistic things, right? Money, cars, homes, and work nonstop, the grind life. And there's not a lot of focus on family. Right. Like, people don't understand the power of a family unit, what you can build together. So I was telling Asha, like, yeah, take as much time as you need off to heal, because giving birth to a child is a big thing. Like, I was telling her the other day, like, I don't think there's anything that anybody can do in this world that supersedes that. That to bring a life into this world is like, that's superpower. Right. For real. Like, the sacrifices that you have to make, because even as men, like, we don't experience that. Right. In the 9 months. Like, we supposed to be there, support you, try to create an environment where there's the least amount of stress, so that it doesn't affect you and it doesn't affect the baby. But like, you really are the one going through it. You're the one that really alters your life in order to create the best environment for that baby to be created. Right? So it takes a lot. And like I said, I think there's a lot of different narratives that's pushed. Like, as soon as you drop the baby, get back in the gym, like, get your body back, or whatever term they be using, snatch, like, get whatever. I don't even know.
Snap back.
Yeah, snap back. But it's just like, y'all go through a lot during pregnancy, and then there's all this pressure on you to snap back. There's pressure on you to get back, take care of everything around the house, or if you're working to get back into work. It's a lot of stuff that women have to do. So that's why I was telling you to just take your time with it. But now that we're back in the swing of things, I want to pull back on doing things such as speaking at companies, because this is something I really want to put my focus on. So I hope that all of our listeners are out there and y'all are ready to really consume and actually do the work, because it's one thing to listen to podcasts. I think it's very important to listen to podcasts because then you become aware of challenges. Then you become aware of things that you can do better in your relationship. So that's extremely important. But no, awareness is the first part. Then you have to actually put in the effort and do what you need to do in order to increase your relationship satisfaction. So we're really ready to push out that content. I'm pulling back on some of the things that I had to do outside of this just so that this can be our main focus. But I'm excited that we're back because we have a lot of things that we want to share with you guys that we think can really help you out. So I hope y'all are all ready for it.
Yes, you guys. So let's get into today's discussion, today's topic, because it's a deep one, to say the least. So you wanna start it off?
Yeah. So for those of you who are just now listening, I'm in the mental health field, right? I have my master's in psychology, positive psychology. And, you know, when I got into this field, it just really opened up my eyes to a lot of things. It really helped me unpack my life and just see how every experience that I had since I was a child has shaped me into the man I am today. And some was shaped for the good and some was shaped for the bad, but it allowed me and Asha to really have deep conversations about our childhood and things that happened to us. And we're 10 years into this thing.
Right.
And we've been having some real deep conversations that we've never had before that has given us a better understanding of each other. And we was like, you know what? We should have a conversation on the podcast about this. Because a lot of people may not know why they are the way they are.
Yeah.
A lot of people may not know why their partner behaves the way that they behave. So let's have a conversation about unpacking trauma in relationships, or the impact that childhood trauma or trauma experience at any point in life has on your relationship. Because when you look at the studies, people who have experienced early childhood trauma or trauma throughout their lives, they actually have lower levels of satisfaction in their relationship. And a lot of them end in divorce. And it's not, let me rephrase that. It's not people who experience trauma that have lower levels of relationship satisfaction or higher levels of divorce, but it's people who haven't dealt properly with that trauma. Because we all experience trauma in our lives. Some actually go through that process of trying to heal that trauma, trying to understand and take control of it, and most people suppress it. So when you're operating out of you suppressing your traumatic experience that you faced in your life, it will show up in your romantic relationships, or all relationships. But this podcast focuses on romantic relationships. But the moment that we start unpacking these traumas and working through it, it definitely hurts. I'm not going to say it's just like so freeing, like you work through your trauma and you reach this point where you're just like, so blissful. Like, no, like when you are actually going through trauma or working through your trauma, it hurts.
Right.
Bad, because you're reliving those experiences. So first, before we even jump into it, is just to simply define what trauma is, because a lot of people may not know what trauma is. And I know before, when people refer to trauma, they often refer to things like going to war, like soldiers who come back, have PTSD, they have traumatic experience over there. And we always thought about that as trauma. But research has shown that it doesn't have to be that extreme, that trauma comes in all different shapes and forms, right? So trauma is basically a distressing experience that you had in your life. And what's interesting about trauma, right? So trauma is your body's response to a traumatic experience. Mm-hmm. And I think that it's important to spell that out for people because trauma is not all created equal, right? There may be somebody, let's take, for example, with us being in the field that we're in now with childhood cancer. There's studies that show that kids who face early childhood illnesses drop out of school, have lower levels of life satisfaction, have lower levels of happiness and well-being when they get older because of that traumatic experience. There's some kids out there who go through that, like Leah, who are excelling in school. They have higher levels of well-being and happiness and close relationships. So it's not the actual traumatic experience that causes trauma, but it's the reaction that the person has to that traumatic experience. Mm-hmm. And those individuals who are better capable of coping with that traumatic experience are often not really impacted by it. But there are some that's just like, they can't really cope with what they're going through. Mm-hmm. And it impacts them throughout life. So one of the ways that you know if you're still dealing with trauma in your past is if, let's say 2 years, 3 years after that traumatic experience has happened to you, when you revisit that moment, when you think about it, or where there's certain triggers around you, your body still produces the same type of emotional response that it did in the moment that it happened to you. Mm-hmm. You know what I mean? Because our brain doesn't know the difference between right now and in the past. Right. So when a traumatic experience happened to you, your brain puts it into this save file, a download file in the brain, because our brain's number one goal is to keep us alive. It's for survival. So it downloads those experiences in your life that have threatened your sense of security and safety, so that when you see these things in the future, it's an automatic trigger that goes back to that moment when that traumatic experience happens. And you see that a lot in relationships. So we just felt like it was important for us to talk about that today and how trauma has really impacted our lives and our relationship.
Yeah. And like you said, I feel like a lot of people deal with trauma in their relationship, right? And it, like we were discussing, it doesn't necessarily have to be from the person that you're with, but it could be things that they're doing to trigger that trauma as well, right? And it could be just little incidents. So I want to start with our own personal experiences, just to give an example of how trauma could show up. I'm
glad that you said you wanted to do it. You're gonna give me the confidence.
just to show you guys like examples of how trauma can show up. Because for me, I feel like from last year, and I know if you haven't heard, we discussed it on the podcast about me going through my own personal healing journey and counseling therapy, just to work through some things that I was dealing with in my own life. And so I can see from conversations that not only I have with my counselor, but also with you as well and your background, how the trauma from my childhood like surfaces in my adulthood. And we were having a discussion the other night, and like you said, we've been having some real deep conversations, y'all.
It's been good, man. Like
it has,
for real. Like when you able to have those type of deep conversations with your partner, where it's like you feel safe to share, because most people don't even want to share their traumas. Mm-hmm. They don't want to talk about it because there's a lot of shame that comes with trauma. Yeah. So a lot of times, like I said, people suppress it, but like when you are able to really have those deep conversations, it's an amazing feeling. I just need to say that. You can get back to saying what you were saying.
Yeah. So we were having a discussion, and for most of you guys, we like to say that our relationship is not perfect, right? I feel like so many people, especially nowadays with social media and everything like that, people get so hung up on the ideal perfect relationship, right? And so when you see celebrities or influencers or whatever you want to call yourself, relationship crumble, is like people automatically go to thinking negative. Oh, I knew I shouldn't have been following them, or I knew this was going on, or this, that, and the third. And it's like, no, they're people too. Mm-hmm. But when we put out an image that we're perfect, then when things aren't picture perfect, then people just automatically are ready to attack or just come at you from a different angle versus saying, you know what, like we said, this is the real, we're going to keep it real with y'all, and everything's not perfect, right? And so we have our discussions, we have our disagreements, but our main thing is always how we can resolve and work through them in a respectful and a positive way so that it's a learning experience versus it being just an argument or a disagreement, right? How can we better learn each other and how to interact and handle certain obstacles and challenges that we may face? Because when you in this, it's a lifelong thing, right?
Yeah.
And so, of course, you're going to have disagreements. You're not going to always agree. Everything's not going to be, picture perfect, but it's important for you to be able to handle those situations and work through them because, like I said, it's a lifelong commitment. And we were having a discussion about trauma, about how it showed up in our relationship. We didn't identify it as trauma, but I identified it as support or being unsupportive, right? Not supportive of me. And so we were having a discussion about that. And initially it came from, which we talked about when Leah was diagnosed and Devin was playing for the Bengals and he had got injured, and it was a whole whirlwind of things that was happening then, right? We had transition from living in Cincinnati to going to Philadelphia to Jersey, like constant, like moving from place to place, not really stable physically, not stable mentally, emotionally, so many things going on, right? Which we discussed in the previous podcast. And
we wasn't stable sexually either. I wasn't getting cheeks on a regular basis.
You always got to take it there. But no, like a lot of things was just all over the place. And like Devin had said before, he was very withdrawn from our relationship, right? And so I constantly said, not to him at the time, but just like to myself, like I felt like in that time of him being so withdrawn and so many people rallying around Devin and Leah in the whole story, that it was very much in a sense like a child being isolated, right? Because here's the world rallying around these two individuals, but if we're a family unit, where's the support, right? For me, right? And a part of me felt like it was kind of like, is it selfish to be expecting someone to ask the question, well, how are you? And not being understanding that, okay, well, these two are going through it. He decided to go public with the story, so I'm just there pretty much as the support. But I just felt like from his perspective, like maybe I don't need the whole world asking me, but I needed him to. And we had a conversation about how that showed up in our relationship with me not feeling like I had any support, because it's like, yeah, you have support from the world. Leah has the support from the world. I'm going through this, but I felt like I had the support from no one, no one to communicate with. And I realized that really started to impact our relationship over the years, even after we had supposedly got through that time of our lives, right? That I felt I carried the burden and the stress and the emotion of not feeling supported throughout our relationship. So when it came up to situations that occurred years later and we're getting in a disagreement, or we're not agreeing with parenting styles, or we're not agreeing with how we can properly communicate, or we're not seeing eye to eye, it always came back to me not feeling that support, right? Yeah. And feeling like there was a void. And we were having a discussions, of course, because Devin, like you said, with your degree and all the research that he did, y'all, he was up hours and hours a night doing this research and doing papers and having discussions and saying, hey, babe, did you know this? Did you know that? And so
research says my kids hate the study show.
So in saying these things, I was like learning as well with him throughout his journey in school, all of these new things. And so it made me realize that support, that void of me not feeling supported by him in that moment and not feeling supported by the world in that moment, and then carrying it on to our relationship in other areas, came from my childhood, right? Because there was times where we had discussions that things that I had went through as far as, I give you guys an example of transitioning from high school to what am I going to do after high school, right? And if you guys don't know, before I was you guys' lovely podcast host, I was a hairstylist, right? And that only was because I had no clue of what I was going to do with my life, right? I didn't have the guidance and the support when I was younger in high school, a teenager, to say, you know what, let's sit down and really discuss what it is that you're going to do with your life after this. I would see like TV shows and stuff, and I just thought it was like a TV show. Like, I didn't know people were really going and taking their kids to college tours and doing this, that, and the third. I wasn't being poured into like that. And so I didn't have that support in that particular area. And so I always would tell Devin, like, even after, us, me doing hair and having my successes in that, like, I need to go to college, right? Mm-hmm. Like, that was my biggest thing, even to this day, that it was just like my biggest regret. Like, I need to go to college. Like, I felt like a piece of me, or a piece of my childhood, in a sense, or my life, that adulthood transition was stolen from me, right? Because I didn't have that backing to say, okay, this is what you need to do to get into college, or this how I can support you in this way to help you show up here, or this, that, and the third. And so, of course, there was other incidents that, occurred as far as the trauma, but just that trauma of not feeling supported when I was younger, I realized that I carried it into adulthood, right? And so I was looking for people to show up for me in certain ways, but realizing that I wasn't going to get that, right? And supporting people in a way that I wanted them to support me, thinking that, oh, if you see, it will make you do, but that's not how it works, right? Yeah. And so I realized that in our conversations and from, counseling and everything, like, no, this goes deeper than what just happened in this particular incident. And yeah, it may be things that have happened while we were together that triggered it, but it's unpacking the baggage and the trauma from years and years and years ago that's showing up now.
Right. It was a lot. It was a lot, but I can tell you this: like, once you understand your partner, because I think the great thing about talking about your past traumas, the things that you experience in your life, is, number one, you get to learn more about your partner, who they are, what they came from, what kind of experiences that they had in their life, so that now you can start to handle them with care. Because y'all are both on the same page, right? Or you should be on the same page after you discuss something that's that you have to be so vulnerable to do, right? You have to be able to create that safe space for you and your partner to heal together, right? Because it's not just a one-person journey that you're going to go on. When your partner is working through it, you have to be there to support them as well. You have to be able to create an environment that allows their growth, that allows their healing. You don't want to keep doing the same thing that has hurt them before in the past. And I think that's one of the beautiful things that I think came out of our conversations, is that now we're both able to take accountability. Like, you're able to take accountability, like, hey, this is the things that I brought from my childhood into the relationship. And then I also have to take accountability for the things that I've been doing that triggers that trauma. Because I think sometimes what may happen in relationships, when you know what somebody has been through, you'll use it against them. Like, oh, I didn't even really do nothing. You just acting like that because of what happened to you in your past. And that right there is going to automatically shut somebody off. They're not going to want to share nothing else with you, and y'all relationship is not really going to grow. But when Asha shared what she had went through, I was able to see, man, now I can see why you reacted to the things that I did wrong, right? And it's not all your fault, because there are things that I shouldn't have been doing. Like, for instance, you touched on that whole time when Leah was battling cancer, and it's like all eyes was on me and Leah. And I rarely did check up on you. Like, we had conversations here and there, but like the in-depth conversations that we have now, we should have had then. And I used to say, and I didn't even share this with you, but these are just things that I've been thinking about. But I used to say in interviews, when people would be like, how did you and Asha get through that tough time? I would say things like, because she didn't expect me to be somebody I couldn't be during that time.
Mm-hmm. I heard.
Yeah.
I heard. Oh, I heard.
And I used to think that was such a good line
Mm-hmm.
because that's how I truly felt.
Mm-hmm.
But the more I thought about it, now that I have grown and I have a better understanding of myself and I'm able to reflect on those times and remove the emotions from it, right? Because I think that's what makes traumatic experience wisdom. When you're able to reflect on your traumatic experiences in your life without the same emotional charge from that experience, you gain a lot of wisdom from it because you're able to look at it from a different perspective. Mm-hmm. And I realized that although that may have been true during that time, that you lowered your expectations for me. Mm-hmm. And it hurt you doing that. And I should have done more by coming to you, mm-hmm. to talk to you, to see how you were doing, recognizing that, yeah, the whole world is cheering me and Lee on, but nobody's really there for you when you're in Cincinnati, basically by yourself.
Right. No, I think that was real what you said, because I remember that line in several interviews.
See, they just be holding on to stuff. See,
no, I really do.
See, people be holding.
But listen, this is the only reason why, and this is why I was able to identify that what was going on around me was really bothering me, mm-hmm. was because I had never. I would go to the interviews and I would go to, the tapings and the filmings, and I would be at the games and everywhere. Like I was everywhere, right? The hospital. And so I seen the support and everyone rallying around you guys. And still, like you said, being in Cincinnati and being by myself and not really having anyone to talk to about the things, it was like a lot. But I always felt like, you know what, I'm just showing up for him, right? Because this is his child battling cancer. Like I'm just showing up for him. I'm being supportive in a way that I would want someone to be supportive if the shoe was on my feet, right? Mm-hmm. And so that's all I kept replaying over and over again. I remember having conversations with my grandma, who was battling cancer at the time, and she was just talking about, having a support system and how important it was just to have someone there just to support you when you're going through that, right? Mm-hmm. And so,
but when you the support, who's supporting you?
Right. But it didn't hit me that things was really impacting me the way that it was of me not feeling supported until we had went to an event. And around that time, I don't remember the event, but we were constantly going to, events and galas and, cancer awareness things and stuff like that. And it was one particular event. And afterwards, everyone comes up to you and they're talking to you and they're like, oh, hey, let's take pictures. Let's talk about this. Let's share my story, share your story. And one woman came up to me and she was like, I know, everyone's here to talk to them and this, that, and the third, but I just wanted to ask you, how are you doing? Mm. And no one had ever asked me that, like nowhere, right? No interview, no nothing, no hospital room. No one ever asked that. And I mean, I understand maybe because I'm not the biological parent, people think that it doesn't impact you the same, but it does, especially being there around the clock. And so in that moment, like I probably wanted to break down and cry in that moment.
I was about to say, I know you probably did.
But I didn't. And I was just like talking to her a little bit. But that to me made me realize like, dang, like one, someone sees me and they see my pain that I'm going through. And they care enough to even ask me how I'm doing in the midst of everything that's going on. But not only that, it's like, this is impacting you, right? Mm-hmm. Because I was trying to be so strong and so macho and be like, oh, he's down. Let me pick him up and carry him. Because when I'm in the, in the position where I may be down in the future, he would do the same for me. And it was just like, no, you down a little bit too. Yeah. So I'm going to need somebody to help me up. If I'm lifting your arm up, lift my leg up, right? Yeah. And so
I'm going to lift that leg up, Bart.
Oh my goodness. You always have to take it.
I'm sorry. I don't know why my mind does that. I'm going to work on that in 2023.
But yes, so that moment was very like eye-opening, like, wow, like this really is impacting you, even though you're making it seem like it's not. Yeah. But even though it is impacting you, even though you feel like, everyone is not, or you don't have the support, everyone's not seeing you, just that one person was enough, right? At that time. And so
it should have been me. It should have been me.
So I think it was like, just from like we said, that really opened my eyes to say, okay, this is something that's impacting me. This is something that's traumatic, that's having an effect on me. And I think a lot of people get in situations where they're in a relationship and they may have trauma that's affecting them, but they haven't quite identified that that's trauma, right? Mm-hmm. Or that's impacted, something from your past has impacted you now, and it's going to affect your future if you don't deal with it, right? Yeah. Because you're thinking the littlest thing can't be trauma, and it is. Like you said, it doesn't have to be something that's so magnified and so over the top to say, oh, this is trauma. No, things that the smallest thing could trigger trauma in you, and you have no idea.
Yeah. And it's interesting because, I even heard when I used to say that women would applaud you. Just be like, yeah, that's right, Asha. That's the way to hold your man down and not like try to force him to be somebody or do stuff when he's going through that tough of a time. And I'm going to call BS on that. Because I think that when you know better, you do better. Mm-hmm. Right? So I definitely don't think that people should badger their partner when they're going through something, or they should talk down on them. But there is a way that you can approach your partner in a sensitive, loving, and caring way to share what you're going through so that y'all can both support each other. Mm-hmm. Because I heard an analogy before where it was like, when you suppress your emotion, a lot of people think that it's gone, that they dealt with it. Mm-hmm. Like that's the craziest thing when people be like, oh, I dealt with it. How you deal with it? I just moved on from it. Yeah. It's like, no, you didn't. But in research, yeah, and the analogy was talking about like if you took a beach ball to the beach and you're in the ocean and you got your two hands on top of this ball and you're pushing it under the ocean, like you suppressed it, like it's no longer on the surface anymore. Right. But eventually, when you get tired, when you move your hands, what's the beach ball going to do? It's going to pop right out of the water. Okay. And that's how it is. What I saw from you. It's like, yeah, for those 2 years, I held that beach ball down under that water. Like you ain't see what I was going through. Nobody ain't see the pain or the hurt that I was dealing with. But eventually I got tired and I had to remove my hands. Right. And now you're going to have to deal with everything that I suppressed for those 2 years is now going to come back to the surface. Yeah. That's and at first, analogy. Yeah, don't use it no more. Great. But now I had to deal with it because when it comes, it's going to come. Right. I'm trying to stop my brain from saying something crazy because you just told me. You know what? But when it comes, listen, get it together. When it comes back to the surface, it's going to come fast. Sorry. It's going to come fast at a high velocity, and you're going to have to deal with it. And most people can't deal with it. And I think that that's what the breakdown in the relationship comes from. Right. Because like you shared something with me that I didn't even think about during this time. Because since Leah was a baby, like whenever there was Easter, Christmas, whatever type of holiday, I will always take pictures with her because it's like, that's not something I did as a kid. Like I wanted to be able to have family pictures. And then when me and you got engaged, you was in the pictures now too. But I never asked you how you felt about being in those pictures because now ESPN was following us around when we're going to go get the pictures done. And I'm just like, yeah, babe, come on, come get in the pictures. And now I look at these pictures and I can see why your smile is so weird. You're like, it's mad weird. But you shared that like, yo, you felt so uncomfortable in those pictures because number one, I didn't even ask you if you wanted to be in it. But number two, I feel like the world was split in half. So some people, because social media is crazy, bro. Like everybody got their opinions. So some people was like happy or supportive when you would post pictures of Leah. And then there would be some people that be like, you're not her biological mom. Why are you doing this, that, and the third? And just be like, right. Like mind y'all business. But I didn't think about that when we were taking pictures and how it was putting you in an uncomfortable position. So then, as we discussed in our episode in blended families, like, it's not easy. Mm-hmm. Like, if you follow you on now, if people follow you now, they'll be like, why are you not posting a bunch of pictures of Leah? Mm-hmm. And it's like, yo, are y'all ever going to be happy? Because at one moment you was telling me not to. Then I don't. Now you're telling me to do it. Mm-hmm. So it was just like a lot of that stuff had came to surface that we tell people all the time, we never sat down and really dealt with. It was like, once we got out of that storm, keep moving. Right. But then eventually it just all came down. It's just like, all right, so what are we going to do about this? Because it hurt our marriage. Yeah. It hurt our relationship. There are still things that we are dealing with from that. And I think that's what Asha shared earlier. Like, our marriage ain't perfect. Mm-hmm. Like, we've dealt with trauma from our childhood, but we've also dealt with trauma in our relationship, right, in our marriage. And we're constantly working through this. And I think that this was the importance of starting a podcast called Real Relationships, because all that fake stuff that y'all see on social media with people just acting like they're just oh so happy, mm-hmm, like their marriage is also, we got tired of seeing it. Yeah. Because we like, yo, do anybody go through what we going through? Like, y'all making blended families look this easy? Yeah.
I think that's just like, I don't know. I think it's great for those who are able to authentically make it work and mm-hmm, it's not forced. But I think it's very important for people to share the realness of what it takes to have a blended family and how to make it work. Because like we said, like, so many people are out there putting up a certain facade that it may not be like, right? And if it is, how did you get to that point? Like, let's not just show a picture of everything being perfect. Let's talk about the process of it. And I think that's what's important for us, like how we talked about on previous podcasts, to be able to share the real of things, to be able to share the journey, right? Because it's not easy. And even from pretty much every episode that we, put out, but especially with that one, I was able to receive a lot of messages like, oh, this was so helpful, or can you help me have a better understanding of how I can work through this or work through that? And I think that's the beauty of us sharing this podcast, is because it's authentic, it's real. It's not us trying to sugarcoat stuff. It's not us trying to just, gloss over things that we're actually dealing with in our relationship. And it's us really bringing forth that issue or that trauma that's impacting us and being like, you know what, no, let's unpack this, let's really figure this out every episode, because this is like a therapy session for us. Yeah.
And I think it might be my turn in this therapy session, because I'm starting to sweat, because I feel like I'm about to share some real stuff. You see this? Oh, my goodness, turn the air up in here.
I can't,
man. So, well, I think I can speak on everybody's behalf that we appreciate you opening up and sharing, a little bit of your past and what you dealt with in your childhood and how it showed up in your romantic relationships. I'll focus on my part next week on the podcast. I ain't really going to jump.
You going to talk about it now. We want to talk about it now.
All right.
Okay.
So this is not, when I share this, I want to put this out there. This isn't no shade to nobody. Mm-hmm. Right. But this is just my experience and my truth. Mm-hmm. So I've talked a lot on the podcast before about my maturation as a man, mm-hmm, my growth as a man, the things that I had to overcome, and how I wanted to create a podcast where we don't talk down on people. We don't talk down on men. We don't talk down on women, because we all understand that everybody's journey is different. We all understand that people weren't born a certain way, but the environments in which they were raised shaped them. Mm-hmm. So you have an understanding of why people behave the way that they do. I don't always focus on what people do. I focus on why they may have done it. So I never just because I'm at a certain level in my journey doesn't mean I can look down on people. And I don't try to hide the type of man that I've been in the past, because I think it's very important that if you're going to impact people, that your transparency is going to lead to their transformation.
Right.
I have to show people, or I have to show men what I've came from to where I'm at now. Otherwise, they're not going to listen, because it's like, you don't know what I'm going through. You don't know what I've been through. Mm. So why would I listen to you?
Right.
So I've been open before about, I didn't really have a lot of respect for women in my life. Like growing up, I just looked at it as a game. Like how many women I can sleep with. You go to parties, how many numbers I can get. How many of these women I can sleep with? Like what woman can I pull? Like it was really a game. And I didn't really understand during that time that my fun was somebody else's pain. But I had to do a lot of reflecting, like why am I like this? Because like I said, nobody just comes out and just automatically don't have respect for women. And I can tell you that society definitely played a role in the way that I objectified women, the way I looked at women. But a lot of it just really came from the home. And I say that because my parents got divorced when I was in the 3rd grade. And it was one of the most traumatic experiences that I've ever experienced in my life. Like the things that we had to go through after that separation is just like, what in the world? Like I really went downhill. I was getting in fights all the time. I had got locked up. I was just doing a lot. I was in school suspension like every other week. I was suspended like every 2 weeks because the in-school suspension wasn't working. I got kicked out of school, straight D's. Like I was like on some other stuff that I wasn't before the divorce. But it was because I was in so much pain, because one day I thought my family was all good. My dad was in the home. My mom was in the home. My siblings was in the home. Like everything was good. And the next day was like, my mom was gone. And I'm like, what in the hell is going on? And normally, and I know I'm not the only person who experienced that, like when your parents go through something like this, they're so flustered by everything that's going on, by the chaos, that they don't really have time to sit down and talk to you about what's going on.
Right.
Because they're trying to get their stuff together. They're trying to figure out how they're going to make things work, because it's just as hard on them as it is on you. But as time went on, I started to find out why the divorce so-called happened. And a lot of fingers was being pointed to my mom. And I'm not going to get into details about it, but that's just what I found out was the reason for the divorce. And when I found that out, it was like instantly my view on women changed. I stopped trusting women. And when I got older and I was getting in relationships, I didn't really care too much. It was more of like, how can I hurt you before you hurt me? Because if I get you first, I don't care if you get me, because it's like, I've already been doing my thing. I don't really care what you've been doing. So I just took this negative approach to dating, to sex, to love. Like I ain't really like ever really experienced it until I was with you, where I was like, oh, this is not just a little puppy love thing. Like this is the real thing. But it took me to get to a certain level in my life to do so. But I hurt so many people along that journey. Like that's the crazy thing, because number one, I wasn't given the support that I needed during that time. And then when I got of age, because I think that we're all responsible to make certain changes in our life when we get to a certain age, that regardless of what has happened to us, it is our responsibility if we don't do the work in order to heal from it. And because I didn't do the work to heal from it, I hurt so many people during that time. But yeah, once I've been able to unpack what I went through, I've been able to have a lot more respect. I view women totally different. And I realized that I couldn't take out my pain for one person on everybody else, because everybody's not the same. But there's some women out here who grind me, so I'm not absolving y'all of what y'all be doing out here. But I'm just talking about, I had the intentions on being who I was going to be or doing what I was going to do before I even took the chance to actually get to know a woman, right? Which is unfair.
So in saying that,
we don't have to ask no questions to try to get a little deeper in this.
No. Because I would like for you to clarify, like, so, and understanding why you felt that way towards women. What made you realize that you wanted to take a different stance with me? Or what was it something that I did, or was it something that you just decided on your own?
Nah, it wasn't something you did, because I think pain makes you blind to authenticity, to real love. When you really in pain, when you really hurt and you've been traumatized, you are blind to a good thing when it comes into your life. Mm-hmm. I knew there was something different about you, but I didn't look at it in that way. Like, oh, this was the person that I could spend the rest of my life with. Mm-hmm. I think that when me and you got back into church and I gave my life to God, and then there was men around me who was holding me accountable for my actions, that's when things started to change. And then I also started to feel more guilt than I've ever felt before in my life for the way that I was behaving, because guilt is like when you do somebody else wrong and you know that you're doing somebody else wrong. Before I started to take that journey on my own, like I didn't feel like I was doing anything wrong. I felt like, man, this is what I'm supposed to do. Mm-hmm. Like, this is how men's supposed to treat women, especially I'm playing ball. I'm at the top of my game of ball. Like, I can do whatever I want. So I never really felt guilty about anything that I was doing. But then when I started to really search for different meaning in life, and I started to get into church and I started to study the word, I started to feel guilty about the things that I had no sense of guilt before. And it made me start to reflect on the type of woman that you really was. Like, it was just something was so genuine about you that you really just showed up like you cared. It didn't matter to you about football. Like, you just enjoyed my company. And that was different, because when you living in that type of lifestyle, it's just like party, party, party. Let's go here. Let's do this. Can you buy me this? Can you buy me that? And you was just like, man, I just want to spend time. Like, me and you used to do some weird stuff. Like, we just at New York Fried Chicken, Kentucky Fried Chicken. We just, not Kentucky, Kennedy Fried Chicken. We just sit there and talk for days. Like, we wasn't even on no type of stuff where it's just like we traveling in the world. Like, this is millionaires. Like, I was a millionaire. Mm-hmm. It was like, yo, come over to my grandmom's house. We sit in the parking lot and talk. We'll just sit and watch TV. Like I said, we'll go to New York Fried. Like, we used to do some regular, everyday stuff. Mm-hmm. And it felt good because that's what I was used to. The money was new. But just doing regular, everyday stuff was home for me. It was what I felt most comfortable doing. And when you made me feel that type of comfort where I didn't have to live this certain lifestyle just because I had a certain amount of money, I was like, yo, I think I can really do life with this woman, because life is ups and downs. Like, there's moments where you're going to have money. There's moments when you're not going to have so much money. And if somebody's just with you for the up times, then what are the chances y'all going to make it through the down times? Mm-hmm. So when you started to show me the real type of woman that I was like, all right, oh, she's not that type. Because I used to always look at women like, oh, eventually they're going to get me. Mm-hmm. But I've never had that feeling with you, and I hope that's a good thing.
We done been locked down for almost 7 years, okay?
Yeah, but it was just how you presented yourself. Like, it just felt right. Mm-hmm. It felt right.
Yeah. Well, yes, that trauma. I feel like a lot of people probably have experienced something similar, especially with your parents separating, like you said, and my parents separated as well. It's like kind of like, oh, you got to pick a side in a sense, right?
Yeah, and that's the crazy thing as a child.
Yeah, as a child, you don't really understand the details of which
And I probably still don't know the details because I don't even want to ask.
Yeah.
But these are the things, like when things are not explained to you as a kid, then you start just using context clues.
Yeah.
And putting things together. And it may not be right.
Mm-hmm.
You know what I mean? Like I'm 33. This happened when I was like, what, 8, 9? I don't remember everything that happened, but my brain thinks it remembers. Mm-hmm. But when you don't sit down and have these conversations with your kid, like, yo, this is what's going on, then they'll put together a story in their own mind. And then if they put together the wrong story and there's not somebody there to support them and walk them through it, there's no telling what they're going to grow up and be like. Like I see the way that a lot of men act now. I promise you, like I said, you don't come out the womb acting like this. Mm-hmm. You don't come out the womb looking at women a certain way or say, I'm going to do this, try to see how many women I can get. Like, nah, there's a lot of hurt men that are hurting people before you get to hurt them.
Right.
And I totally understand that. But until you are able to actually process what you're going through and then surround yourself with men who can hold you accountable, not in a way where they're talking down on you, but they're coming from a place of understanding and love, does it really open up your heart to change? Mm-hmm. And I had mentioned that recently on social media, on the Shade Room, and I had a lot of women come at me because they didn't agree with what I was saying, which is cool because my message wasn't really intended for women, it was for men. But it was a man that was talking about how if a woman doesn't want to get with a man's program, he'll move around until he finds a woman that will. Mm-hmm. And that these weak men just are intimidated by strong women. It's just like, bro, even if what you're saying is true, because it is, what you're saying, the fact that you're criticizing and coming from a place of contempt, like you're better than the man, you don't really have a chance to open that man's heart. Mm-hmm. Whereas if you came from a place of love and understanding, it's like, I know what you're going through. I used to be that type of man, but this is the work that I put in. This is what I did. These are the steps that I took so that I can start to appreciate women more and understand their value. Then you open up a man's heart to change, but you that doesn't happen with you talking down on somebody. Yeah. You know what I mean? And I think that one of the reasons why I love this podcast is that we're not pitting men and women at war with each other. Mm-hmm. Because people like that, what you do is you're telling women right. You're giving them good information for them to understand men, but you're doing it while you're putting men down. So you're preparing women for who? Right. Because there won't be enough men in order to meet this new standard that they have for themselves. So I'm not telling you to not give women the game about what kind of standards they should have, what they should be looking for in men and what they shouldn't accept from men. But you also have to help men rise to the certain level so that we're growing at the same pace so we can meet each other at the same place. Mm-hmm. You can't lift women up and then put men down, because who are the women going to date? Who are they going to turn to? Like, it doesn't really make sense. And I don't understand how a lot of women in the comment section didn't understand what I was saying. Mm. But this is just a wash and repeat. We saw this happen plenty of times before. Yeah. So it's just like, at what point are you going to learn when somebody's pandering to you and when somebody's actually trying to uplift you while also uplifting those people that you want to get in a relationship with?
Yeah. Well, I feel like to close, I think just sharing somewhat of the tips or ways to really evaluate the trauma, recognize the trauma in your relationship to identify it so that you can deal with it in a sense. For me, I think the biggest thing was for me to really acknowledge how certain things made me feel, like how triggers made me feel, right? The emotion that I was feeling. So, for example, if we had a disagreement or something happened between you and I, and if my emotions and my feelings and everything, the way I reacted was so elevated to the point when I sat back and thought about it, it was just like, was this reaction called for? Was it necessary.
Why are you giving them the ABC? Okay. We're not even going to tell them about that,
break
though.
it down in that manner, but just for you guys, was it necessary for me to react in this manner, right? And if it wasn't, right, now let me identify why I did react in that manner, okay? So, how... Stop,
I'm just saying, I'm loving this right now.
But no,
you talking my language.
This is serious because it really helps you to identify it. So if it's not necessary for me to react like that, okay, well, what happened that caused me to react in that manner and caused me to, in a sense where it could be me overreacting or me acting. Sometimes people feel like it was just extra, right? What was the cause of that? Let me identify this, okay? And once I identify and I have that, now I can go back and say, oh, how can I change how I react? How can I change how I communicate? How can I address this situation and communicate with you differently? But the biggest thing outside of that was for me to go back and say, this is from here, right? The trigger, this is from this is from that. I had to identify, and I think that's the biggest thing for so many people is identifying what it is that's triggering those emotions. Because a lot of times we think, oh, it's just the way that you said this or the way that you did this or this, that, and the third. But it's like, if I sit back and I look at it and I say, oh, well, you did say that in a certain manner that I didn't like. But like we had conversations deep down, it's what was said, right? It was what was said, and it made me feel like this. And the reason I felt like this was because this had happened to me before. So this came back up because you triggered that in me. And I realized once I started putting all those pieces together was like, yo, like we got some unpacking to do. We may be thinking that we healing, we on that journey, but we still got some baggage that we have to unpack. And so I think that was the beauty from our conversations, but from my healing journey as well, is like when you think that I've arrived and I've healed and I'm at this point. It's like, no, because now let's dig a little deeper. Because most of the times we're working on surface level stuff, right? We're only saying the bare minimum. We're talking about the things that happen in the right now, right? What happened in this argument right now? But if you go back and really unpack your reactions and your emotions to why you reacted that way for you internally, you'll be unpacking some real stuff, right? And I think that's when the true work is done in your relationship, because you start to realize how your emotions and your feelings and thoughts and everything that you're bringing to that relationship is impacting not only you, but your spouse, your partner as well. So once you have that clear understanding, now let's really do the work, you know?
Man, I'm so proud. I feel like it was a Mr. Miyagi moment, like, my student is not a teacher. The way you just broke that down was absolutely beautiful.
Okay.
No, because I think that is true. Number one, you have to be able to ask yourself, does my reaction or my emotional response coincide with the action that was taken? Like, does it make sense that I felt this way or that I behaved this way? And then if it doesn't, then you have to ask yourself, well, what did I believe that person taking this action meant? And there's two type of beliefs. You can have surface level beliefs where it's like, I don't think that my partner really cares or cares about what I'm going through at that moment, right? And then there's deeper beliefs that you talked about, like those iceberg beliefs where you have to dive deep into your life to find out what is it that's causing me to do this. And then you can go from, I don't think that my partner cares about how I'm feeling, to I never felt like my opinion mattered or my feelings mattered because that didn't show up for me in my childhood. So there's a lot of things that you can there's a lot of tools that we'll introduce to y'all soon to help you be able to work through those type of conflicts in your relationship. But another thing that I just wanted to share, again, I wanted to just reiterate this because I think this is very important for people to understand if they're even dealing with a traumatic experience, if they still have the trauma from things that happened in the past. And a lot of times that you're still dealing with the trauma because, like you said, sometimes people think that they're healed from it or they've done the work, but they really didn't. It's like if you can look back at that traumatic experience, if you look back at a traumatic experience in your life and you still feel like you're in it right now, like for so long after when Leah got diagnosed with cancer, I wouldn't look at pictures because when I looked at pictures of her bald and skinny and with no eyebrows, I would have the same emotions that I did the day that she was diagnosed with cancer. Like it was that real to me. My body didn't know the difference. Like I was still stuck in those emotions. There are times where your spouse may have cheated on you and you think you have forgave them, but when you think about the moment that they cheated on you, that same anger that took over your body the day that you found out is still there. That means you didn't process it. So when you look back at things that happened to your life, if it still has that emotional salience, if you can still feel that emotional resonance, then that means that traumatic experience has not been fully dealt with. And it's so important that you do the work to do it. And I know a lot of people don't want to do therapy or counseling because a lot of people think it means that something's wrong with you. Well, something's wrong with all of us. And we got to do the work, because if we want to get better, we have to acknowledge that, look, things did happen to us. It did affect us, but this is the moment that it stops.
Right.
We're not going to allow that person or that thing or that experience to still have control over my life right now. Because when I'm looking around, it's affecting everything around me. It's affecting my relationships, romantic friendships. It's affecting my job. It's affecting my relationship with my kids. We got to do the work, because that's the only way that you can really become the person you was meant to become. That's the only way that you can really become that couple that you're capable of doing. You have to be able to work through the things that affected you in the past so that you can create the future that you want for yourself.
Absolutely. So you guys, we hope you guys enjoyed this episode. I enjoyed it. I enjoyed coming back and chatting with you guys. Just know and just expect to hear us on a regular, okay?
Yeah.
So until next time, you guys, keep it real.
Yes, sir.